Rain drilled the city straight down, steady as a firing line. It turned the flood district alleys into black channels that caught every flicker of broken neon. The reflections made the streets look alive, like some fevered beast shifting under. Water. Darien Meyer moved through it like he knew the bones beneath the skin. Hood low, pack high, boots stepping only on the firm strips between grates. His breath came steady. He tested the air without thinking metallic, not sour. The ridge filters still held. He logged it away the way other men checked their weapons. He was 34 now, too young to feel as old as he did, too stubborn. To quit, once he'd been a frontier scout, sent to edge-world garrisons where orders came down, stamped with authority and washed clean of conscience. The day those orders turned civilian, he refused. He never fired, never obeyed, just walked. Away, that line still burned in him. Now he worked as an environmental surveyor testing drains, patching pipes, keeping districts habitable enough for the poor bastards who had nowhere else to go. He told himself his rule was simple. Fix the part in front of you. Nothing grand. Nothing that made speeches. Just enough to keep the roof standing another night. The sound that stopped him wasn't rain. A scrape metal dragged across concrete. His hand brushed the strap of his pack, an old habit of readiness. Ahead, under the stutter of a failing sign, something moved. A shape bent low, thin as a shadow on water, fingers picking through rotted. Cartons with a surgeon's care. He crouched before he thought about it, lowering his height, keeping his hands where they could be seen. The child froze when she felt his eyes. Wet cloth clung to a narrow frame, gauze-thin, skin-tinted pale violet beneath the street glare. Silver hair, snarled and matted, stuck to her cheeks like wire. Her eyes lifted to him, too large for her face, the way eyes get when the body starves. Hungry? Darien kept his voice flat, no edge, no warmth. A simple question, stripped down. She didn't answer. Her jaw tightened. Instead she asked, "If I say yes, do you take something first?" Darien let the rain fill the pause. Then he shook his head once. No. Her expression didn't shift, but something in the set of her shoulders loosened, almost invisible. She looked at his hands. Nails short, scars across the knuckles, no ring. Still, she stayed 2 steps back. He pointed with his chin to a door, painted blue a few buildings over. Hot food. 5 minutes. You can sit near the exit. She studied. Him again. Then, careful as a stray that had learned every trick of cruelty, she rose and followed, always leaving him the space to close the distance if he chose. He didn't. The stairwell stank of wet plaster and battery acid. The rails shook under there. Wait. He unlocked the blue door, let her in first, then shut it against the rain. The room was small, ordered, stripped down to function. Table, 2 chairs, narrow bunk, roll-out cot by the door, a heater humming beneath a patched window. A kettle sat ready. Darien hung his jacket, set his pack down, and went to the stove without. Ceremony. Flame on, pot set, broth and rice stirred with salt. The steam rose gentle, honest. He kept his eyes off her more than on. She never stopped watching him. He placed a chipped blue bowl in front of the chair nearest the door. Wash your hands. Soap's new. She tested the tap, flinched at the cold, then washed quick and efficient. No wasted splash. She ate the rice fast, neat, like she didn't trust it to last. When the bowl was empty, she licked the spoon clean, set it down at a careful angle, and drew 1 long breath before speaking. "I heard you want a wife," she said, voice steady but too practiced, like she'd rehearsed the words. "My mother is perfect for you." Darien froze not because of the audacity, but because of the calculation in her tone. It was bait, a test, maybe even a plea. He met her gaze and saw the tremor in her jaw, the defiance in her eyes, and the hunger that went deeper than the bowl he'd just filled. The rain hammered the window. He didn't look away. The rain never stopped, not really. It only changed voices' downpour to hiss, hiss to drum, drum to the hollow clatter through cracked gutters. Darien had learned to read its moods the way others read a clock. Tonight it pressed steady on the patched glass, a background pulse that made the little room feel more sealed than it was. The child Ziri, she would say later, sat with her knees tucked up, hair dripping onto the chipped floor tiles. The line she had spoken hung between them like a blade still waiting to fall. My mother is perfect for you. Darien leaned one shoulder to the wall, arms loose at his sides. He didn't crowd her with questions. He simply asked, "Where is she?" The girl's eyes flicked to the bathroom door, where 2 toothbrushes hung from a cord, one wrapped, one worn. Then she looked at the window as if the rain itself could answer. "Close," she said, voice clipped. "But she thinks humans only take." Darien's jaw ticked once. He knew what she meant. He didn't press. "What do you think?" The girl pointed at the small bowl he'd set out, at the wrapped brush, at the folded cot by the door. "You plan for someone else. You fix things that aren't yours. That's different." He studied her. Thin arms, clothes ragged, eyes already too old. A survivor, but not yet broken. If I meet her, you both eat. That's the deal. Nothing more. Her mouth pressed flat. If you shout at her, I'll bite you. Fair. Darien reached for the spare jacket hanging by the door, heavy canvas, smelling faintly of sun and soap from some dry day long past. He held it out. "Show me." She hesitated, then slid into the jacket, the sleeves hanging past her hands. The fit made her look even smaller, but she straightened her spine as if it were armor. They stepped into the rain together. Darien walked center on the narrow path, letting his shoulders take the weather, boots steady through the shallow currents. The girl kept 2 paces back, just far enough that she could still vanish if she had to. She scanned every alley mouth, with the sharpness of a child raised in danger but unarmed. When they reached another blue-marked door, she stopped and touched her knuckle to a chalk symbol on the frame, a circle with 3 lines drawn through. Her hand lingered as if testing for heat. "You gave shelter before," she said. "Yes." "Did they leave, or did you make them leave?" "They left when they wanted things I wouldn't give." She studied him a long moment, rain dripping down her sharp chin. Then she pushed the door open and slipped inside. Heat hit all at once, a warmer current rolling over damp clothes and tired skin. The apartment was smaller than his, tighter, with fewer signs of order, but it had been lived in. Cloth bundles, stacked cans, a chair angled where someone could watch both window and door at once. She was there, thought the mother. Pale violet skin dulled by exhaustion, hair braided tight to hide tangles, eyes black and sharp as flint. She stood half-shadowed near the heater, one hand braced on the wall, her stance making clear she was ready to run, fight, or barter. Her gaze went first to the child, checking, counting, assuring. Only then did it move to Darien.Zyrie slipped, free of the jacket, and darted to her side, pressing against her hip. "Mama, he gave me food. He didn't ask first. He wants you to hear." The woman's jaw flexed. "Does he?" Her voice was low, husky with suspicion. Darien stayed still. "I keep drains clean. Patch leaks. Feed who's hungry if I can. That's all. You live alone?" "Yes. You want company?" Her tone wasn't invitation. It was interrogation. "I want the roof to hold," Darien said. "If you sit inside it, that's your choice." For a moment, the only sound was rain on glass and the hum of the heater. Then she nodded once, the barest tilt of her chin. Not trust, not even consent. Just allowance. The girl exhaled like a spring released. She leaned into her mother, eyes bright despite hunger. "See? I told you. He fixes things." He didn't lie. The woman looked at Darien again, measuring. "One night," she said. "No talk, no touching. Understood." Darien moved only enough to close the door, drop the bar into place, and hang the jacket on a hook. The sound of the lock landing clean echoed like a pact. The room held its silence. Rain pressed the windows. Fear lingered, but it bent under the weight of something new, rules spoken aloud, boundaries set, and the faintest chance of safety for one night that morning came without light, only a gray dilution of the night. The rain still worked the streets, softer now, a steady hiss against the patched window. Darien woke the way he always did, hand under the pillow where the knife waited, palm flat to the floorboards to feel the tremor of the building. Nothing. Urgent. He let his breath out, slow, then rose. The girl stirred first, rolling toward the sound of the kettle as he set it on the stove. She blinked at him like she wasn't sure if the room had stayed the same through the night. When she saw the cot still at the door, the bowl stacked on the shelf, the heater still humming, she relaxed by inches. The mother Nar, he would learn. Her name, as naturally as breathing, was already awake. She hadn't slept deeply. Her eyes tracked him from the bunk where she had stayed, half curled around the child, guarded, sharp, unblinking. He didn't speak first. He poured oats, added the last of his dried fruit, and set 3 bowls on the table. He pushed the largest toward the child, the second toward her, and kept the smallest for himself. Ziri ate with the quick neatness of someone who had learned meals could vanish. Nar watched without lifting her spoon. She measured him instead, how he didn't explain the portions, how he didn't watch her eat, how his hands worked fast, but without show. Only when Ziri slowed did she take her own first bite. "You live by rules," she said, finally. "I keep what works. And when it doesn't, I change it out loud. So no one has to guess." Something flickered in her expression, recognition, maybe. She lowered her eyes to the bowl and finished the food. After breakfast, Darien laid out tools from his pack. Resin tube, bent peg, spare grate. He oiled the door latch, cleaned lint from the heater's filter, tested the bar with 2 sharp drops, until it landed smooth. He didn't ask permission for each act. He worked. Nar followed with her own quiet industry. She pulled a length of frayed cloth from her bundle, cut it straight, and began stitching edges so threads wouldn't tangle. Ziri counted beans in a pouch, lining them into 2s and 10s, her brow furrowed like the world's smallest accountant. When she finished, she announced, "Families eat first and talk later." A phrase picked up from someone else, handed down like a rule that made sense. Darien glanced at her and gave a small nod. "That works." By midday, the rhythm had shifted. The silence between them no longer pressed like suspicion. It filled with a low sound of shared labor. Darien patched the seam on a cracked bucket, while Nar braided a strip of cloth into a neat tie. Ziri leaned against the heater, tongue poking at her lip as she sorted beans, then washers. Then bits of thread. Narr broke the quiet with a story, voice stripped of sentiment. "I apprenticed at a textile mill once. Could braid thread so fine? It lay like water on skin. When the mills burned, I slept in a frame shop until the roof fell. After that, we moved when we had to. I've not traded my body for anything. I won't." Darien didn't look up from the bucket. Noted. "You don't ask why. I don't need to. The truth's enough." She studied him like she'd never seen a man choose restraint over curiosity. And she turned back to her cloth. Later, when he stepped out to check a drain on the landing, he scratched a small line beneath a chalk circle on the doorframe. "Occupied by choice." A mark only neighbors like Thomas would read. When he returned, He found Nar at the window, her hand pressed against the seam where he'd sealed broken glass. "You did this clean," she said. "I try." She looked at him. Fully then, eyes narrowing, not soft, but not hostile. Most men pretend they're fixing something when they're only looking for the trade. You don't pretend. Darien wiped resin from his fingers, kept his answer plain. Work done is work done. No speeches. She didn't thank him. Not yet. But when she laid her cloth aside, her shoulders had dropped half an inch from their guarded height. Ziri curled on the bunk with her beans lined in rows and let her eyes, close without asking permission. Rain pressed steady at the window. Inside, the room sounded human. Bowls scraped clean. Water ran. Thread pulled tight. Boots drying by the door. Not safety, not yet. But something close enough that all three let themselves breathe easier for the first time in too long. Rain eased by the next morning, trading its roar for a whisper that threaded through broken gutters. The city smelled of wet metal and old oil. Darien woke before the others, lit the stove, and set oats to simmer. The routine had taken root without anyone naming it. By the time the bowls hit the table, Ziri was perched ready, hair wild, beans, lined in crooked rows. Nar rose slower, eyes on him as if she were still deciding whether the rhythm was a trick or a truth. He portioned the food the same as before, largest for the child, second for her, smallest for himself. He didn't announce it. He never did. That mattered. Nar watched the pattern again, filed it as fact, not favor. She ate, then wiped her hands on cloth she had folded square. Her movements were sharp, practiced, purposeful. When the bowls were clean, Darien strapped his kit. Roof leaked 2 blocks over. Thomas called it. Back in an hour. He looked at Ziri. You want a task? Her face lit. Always. He poured a pouch of beans into her small hands. Count by 2s. Don't skip. Ziri saluted like a soldier and set to work. Nar said nothing, but her eyes softened in. The way of someone who saw a child briefly safe. Darien returned damp and smelling of tar. He brought bread rolls wrapped in wax and a jar of roots. He set them on the table, no speech. Nar clocked what he gave up to carry them, then lifted her. Chin, I'll pay for what we eat. With my hands, not my body. Then work, he said. She tested him. Where? He pointed down the block. Nara's bodega. She keeps a back room. Sacks split, seams torn. She'll trade food for repair. She won't write names on ledgers that hurt people. Nar didn't. Answer at once. She tied her hair tight, tucked Ziri's scarf around the girl's neck, and nodded. We'll see. The shop sat under a cracked awning. Inside smelled of cumin, dust, and ledger ink. Mara was small, wiry, her sweater neat. Despite the damp, her eyes skipped from Darien to Nara's hands. Can you mend handles? Reinforce corners? Yes, Nar said. Fast? Yes. Quiet? When required? Mara jerked her head toward the back room. 8 sacks by midday. Payment is bread, greens, oil. Scraps are yours. No questions asked. Nar stepped inside, shoulders squared, testing the corners for traps. But the space was clean. Thread cones stacked. Table swept. Scale oiled. She relaxed a fraction and set to work. Her fingers moved steady, stitching cloth into strength again, needle flashing like memory made visible. Darien took Ziri outside to a community table under patched tin. Men sorted metal fittings by size. He asked for the dull bin. Ziri grinned, set washers in rows with fierce concentration. If I do it right, she said, do I win beans? 3, Darien said, and a story about metal that lies when it's wet. She giggled, bent to her work. By midday, Nar finished the sacks. Her back straightened as if she'd been. carrying something heavy for months, and finally set it down. Mara checked each stitch, gave a short nod. Back rooms yours 2 mornings a week. Keep the quality. Keep the work. Nar met her eyes. I don't want a man at the door, pretending he owns my hands. Then he won't stand there, Mara said. She jerked her head toward Darien. He knows. Nar breathed once steady, gathered the scraps, and rejoined them on the street. Ziri clutched her beans like treasure, smiling wide. Darien matched pace without fuss. Back at the blue door, they shared bread warm from Mara's shelf. Ziri divided it evenly without being told. Nar noticed, but didn't praise out loud. She only let the act stand, solid as stone. That night, Ziri pulled out a folded sheet of paper she had hidden under the primer pages. The letters were shaky, upright, careful. At the top she had written, Family Rules. 3 lines followed in a child's hand. We eat, we tell the truth. We wait for each other. She looked at them both. Pride and fear tangled on her face. We sign? Nar's throat worked. Darien's jaw set. He reached for the stub of pencil. The rain outside hissed approval against. The glass dot night dropped like a sheet of iron, the kind of dark that pressed every corner until even the heater's small glow looked fragile. The rain had returned to its heavier voice, steady drumming against the patched glass. Darien worked by lamplight, oiling the door bar until it slid smooth, then setting the flame low and safe away from the curtain. Routine kept fear in its place. NRR. Sat near the window, mending a strip of cloth into a curtain divider. Her hands moved with brisk precision, but her eyes kept pulling to him, measuring what each movement meant. At the bunk, Ziri arranged her beans in lines, then scattered them again, testing how many rules she could break before someone scolded her. When no rebuke came, she sighed in satisfaction and tucked them back neat. Families eat first, talk. Later, she said, repeating the phrase she loved, then added, but sometimes families make rules too. She held up her crooked sheet, family rules scrawled at the top, and tapped the pencil stub against it. We already signed. Darien met Nar's gaze. She looked away first, then back again, her chin lifting in defiance. Rules are one thing, she said. Boundaries are another. Darien's answer came even. Say them. 1 night at a time. No talk. No touching. He nodded. Heard. She frowned, as if she'd expected him to push. Most men argue. I'm not most men. Ziri yawned and pulled the scarf around her shoulders, muttering, He's more boring. Then she grinned into the cloth, as if boring might be the safest thing she'd ever known. When the child finally fell asleep, the curtain half drawn, Nar remained by the window. The lamplight brushed the strong line of her thigh where her dress had torn, and she didn't shift to hide it. Instead, she watched him as he set a small object on the table, a ring, hammered brass, the surface dented but polished clean. He didn't push it toward her. He only placed it where it could be seen and said, I meant what I said. I want you. My hands stay where they are until you choose. The room went still. The heater hummed. Outside, rain hammered, demanding entry. Nar rose slowly, crossing to the table. She looked down at the ring, then at him. Her voice came steady but low, as if testing the shape of the words. I will say yes or no on the day I choose. Tonight I say only this. She reached for her repaired dress, lifted it at the shoulder, and turned so he could see the tie she had sewn uneven. Help me with the knot. Darien stood, hands steady. He threaded the silk through the loop, tied it firm, flat, without lingering. His fingers brushed her skin once, no more. When the knot held, he stepped back. She turned toward the mirror shard by the sink, checked the line, then faced him again. For a breath, her hand hovered at her side. Then she placed it on his wrist, deliberate, no tremor. "You will wait until I say." "I hear you," he said. She released him, crossed to the bunk, and lay down beside her daughter. Ziri stirred, half asleep, and mumbled, "If you kiss, do I close my eyes?" "Close your book," Nar murmured back. "Finish your letters." The girl smiled, drifting away again. Darien lowered the lamp until the room was more shadow than light. He lay on the cot by the door, one hand under the pillow, the other flat to the floorboards, reading the building's tremor as it settled. Rain drummed steady overhead. He closed his eyes on the thought that restraint was not strategy, but strength itself, and that tomorrow would test it all again. The storm shifted but never left. By morning, the rain had thinned to a cold mist, whispering through the drains Darien had patched the week before. The building creaked as it warmed, and the heater hummed back to life with a stubborn little growl. Darien rose from the cot the same way as always, hand to the floorboards, ears tuned for trouble. Nothing urgent. The rhythm of survival held steady. Ziri stirred first, hair wild, scarf coiled around her neck like a pet. She blinked, checked the table for the paper she'd written, and smiled when she saw it still safe under the primer sheets. Her eyes darted to Darien. "Any new rules?" she asked, voice bright with the strange confidence of a child who wanted certainty written down. "One," he said as he poured oats into the pot. "Shoes off in bed is now a law." She laughed, shoved her heels against the blanket just to test the edge, then pulled them back when her mother gave her that sharp warning look. Darien caught the exchange and the smile that tugged at them. Girl's mouth told him she had already decided this house was hers in ways she hadn't dared hope before .NAR or sat straighter on the bunk. She wore her hair in a loose braid now, not the tight knots of a woman ready to flee. She watched Darien work the stove, quick but not rushed, every action measured. In daylight, his scars looked like old choices, not fresh danger. She studied the brass ring where he'd left it on the table. She didn't pick it up. Not yet. They ate together, the same pattern of portions. Ziri claimed the largest, split the bread without being told, slid half toward her mother. Nar didn't praise her. She let the act speak for itself. When the bowls were clean, Darien laid a clean towel and a comb on the table. "I have to sweep the east drains," he said. 2 hours if nothing breaks. 45 minutes more if it does. If you stay here, lock the door. If you leave, take the jacket. Nar's eyes flicked to the brass ring, then back to him. She tied her braid tighter and said, "We won't leave. But I won't be idle. I'll sew. I'll cook. I'll make this place work." "Then it will," he said simply and strapped. His pack. He paused at the door. "You told me once you left a mill when men asked for things you wouldn't give. That matters. But if I'm your roof for more than 2 nights, I should know the lines you already drew." Her chin lifted. He wanted a thankful face and a quiet mouth. He wanted a body that never said no. "I left because hunger is easier to live with than silence. I don't say yes unless I can choose it again the next day." Darien nodded once. "Good. I won't ask for a yes. I can't stand hearing it reversed." Ziri raised her hand like a student. "If Mama says yes and then says no, do you get angry in your chest?" "Disappointed," he said. "Not cruel." The girl relaxed, shoulders dropping. "Okay." He stepped into the hall, checked the chalk mark, added a fresh line beneath the circle. Occupied by choice. Then he left them with the sound of his boots fading down the stair. Nar watched the door until the silence settled. Her hand lingered on the brass ring, thumb brushing the dent. She didn't slip it on. Instead, she set it back down and reached for her thread kit. But her eyes had changed, less guarded, more awake. When Darien returned with bread, greens, and a dry bar of soap, the air inside was different. Ziri had stacked beans in perfect rows. Every number counted. Nar's needlework lined the room in small repairs, curtains stitched, hems reinforced, scraps turned useful. The apartment no longer looked borrowed. It looked lived in. Darien saw. It said nothing, only rinsed his hands and laid the food out. Ziri reached for the family rules sheet, held it high. We eat. We tell the truth. We wait for each other. That means you too, right? It does. Darien said. Narr stood, slow and deliberate. She picked up the brass ring and held it in her palm. The rain ticked against the window, steady and quiet. We said 2 nights, she said. You kept your word. You didn't hover. You told the truth. You didn't turn restraint into a sermon. I am not ready for a crowd. I am not ready for paper offices. But I am ready for a ring and a door that says family. Darien stayed where he was, steady as stone. Then stay. Be my wife in our way. No priests, no speeches. Witnesses when you choose them. The work starts now. Narr extended her hand. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit not perfect, but right. Kiss me, she said, her voice even testing him. The way you will when the day's busy and you still want me. He stepped close and kissed her once firm, plain, no show. His hand stayed on her waist with strength and restraint. She met the pressure with her own, then broke first, eyes bright. Good, we can work with that. Ziri clapped once, serious. As a judge, sign. She pushed the paper forward. Darien wrote his name in block letters. Narr followed, her hand steady. Ziri scrawled hers and added a hook mark because she liked how it looked. The paper went into the drawer, not the city's ledger, but theirs. When Thomas knocked soft on the door that evening and muttered, "Roof holds, meters good," Darien opened just enough to show him the ring in the folded page. The old man squinted, nodded once. I saw nothing, he said, and passed a spare hinge through the gap. Inside, the door bar landed clean. The 3 of them looked at the ring, the paper, the warm bowls on the table, and the rain-dark street outside. The room didn't feel like borrowed space anymore. It felt made. The rain never really left the city. It only changed its voice. That night it whispered instead of hammered, threading through gutters, pooling in the alleys where neon signs guttered and hissed. Inside the blue door apartment, the heater hummed steady, bowls stacked clean, and Ziri slept with her hand still, curled around her beans. The ring on Nar's finger caught a glint from the lamp, a small brass fire in the dark. Darien sat at the table with his pack open, laying out tools in quiet rows. Habit, preparation. He'd been a scout long enough to know silence never lasted. Narr stood by the window, one hand on the frame, her eyes trained on the street below. She wasn't just watching. She was listening, shoulders stiff, chin lifted like a woman bracing for an old storm. Tell me, Darien said at last. She didn't. Turn. You used to wear a uniform. His hand stilled over the wrench. I did. You followed orders until you didn't. What made you stop? He looked at the dark glass. His reflection stared back, tired, scar-lined. A line crossed. Civilians, children. I wouldn't be the man who obeyed that order. Her head tilted. Ben, you already know. Know what? Narr turned now fully, and the lamplight cut sharp across her cheekbones. The mills, the ones I worked in, the ones like it. They weren't abandoned by weather or rust. They were starved on purpose, choked at the pipes, shuttered by decree. Men in high rooms decided it was easier to drain a people than feed them. Darien's stomach tightened. He remembered the dispatches, the coded lines that had filtered down years ago. Economic reallocation, resource attrition zones. He hadn't thought much beyond his orders then. But he remembered the maps, the clusters marked red. It wasn't accident, he said. No. Her voice was flat. It was policy. Ziri stirred at the sound, mumbling, clutching her scarf. Nar softened, smoothing her daughter's hair, until she stilled again. And she straightened, eyes locked on Darien. The day you put that ring on me, you tied yourself to this truth. They broke us on purpose. And they'll come here next. As if summoned by the words, a knock rapped. Against the door 3 sharp strikes, not Thomas's shuffle or Mara's soft call. Darien moved instantly, hand to the door bar, body angled low. Nar pulled Ziri close, eyes fierce. Darien Meyer, a voice called from the hall. Too even, too official. Former scout, registry number K7149. You are ordered to present yourself for service review. The words dropped like stones into the silence. Ziri's eyes went wide. Nar's jaw hardened. Darien didn't move. His hand pressed against the brass ring, still warm on her finger. It's starting again, he said quietly. Nar met his gaze, unflinching. Then this time we don't just survive. We resist. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, as though the city itself understood what was coming.